Hey guys, so sorry about the first period Zoom issues today. I want to say that I do get emails when guys try to log into Zoom when I haven't started a meeting yet. And so there were about 7 emails that came through as soon as the internet came back this morning. So I want to thank you for continuing to try to log in, even though I think many of you did have the sense that it was down. So I really do appreciate that. That's pretty much what I'll be asking in the future if that happens again. Um, just to fill you in, it did just completely go down for about 12 minutes this morning, at least in this classroom. It doesn't seem to have happened elsewhere, but we'll figure out what that means going forward. Just to fill you in on what you did miss, we had the groups come back together and discuss the different philosophers that you had looked at. To go down the list really quickly, Descartes was really the first one who let this cat out of the bag, so to speak, that it was possible to doubt the things that authority in your culture told you. Of course, in Descartes' day, the authority would have been the Catholic Church. So if you had questions about the meaning of life and philosophy of any sort, et cetera, you could go to the Catholic Church and you could say, hey, Father, what's the meaning of life? And whatever he told you was pretty much going to go. And that sounds bad to modern ears, but I want to be clear that it's really not. Because if you think about it, most of the people we're dealing with in the Middle Age, well, really the Middle Ages in Europe, are illiterate. They are peasant farmers. They're serfs, if you know feudal terminology. And really the last thing you really need if you are a subsistence farmer desperately trying to grow, enough carrots, cabbage, and chicken to get yourself through the winter is to have to think about the meaning of life. So you defer those questions, and it serves a very important social purpose. Of course, Descartes says, I believe in the Catholic Church. He was a Catholic, but he comes around and he says, but I don't really believe that it's indisputable. I don't really believe that it cannot be doubted. And so he goes through and he tries to think of all the different things that he knows that can be doubted. And he says, well, my experience. Well, there's been plenty of times where I've woken up from a dream that I thought was real. And so he can doubt anything that his senses tell him and we all have this experience, his senses have lied to him many, many times before. Things that I've seen in dreams, heard, smelled, touched, tasted, whatever, in dreams turn out to be completely false. So he says, anything external to me, we can wipe that out completely. He moves on to consider math briefly. He says, well, triangles have 3 sides and their angles add up to 180. He says, theoretically, there could be some kind of evil spirit that's tricking him into understanding things that way. So he writes all of that stuff off too. The one thing that he can't bring himself to doubt is the fact that he is thinking, and therefore he must exist. Maybe not in this physical form, but at least as a thinking thing of some sort, a thing capable of thought. That's what the phrase, I think, therefore I am, actually means. That if I were not, so to speak, if I did not exist, could not think. So, he then says, but there's a good God who would never allow all that kind of trickery, and so I believe all the things around me and everything's fine. Which is the lamest cop-out in history of philosophy, but one that he was able to make because he was living in an era where everybody was a devout Christian. So the idea of, but there's a good God, would be acceptable to anyone who was listening to him. Kant was the next one we looked at. Kant kind of says you should act kindly, that a free person is one who acts according to his goodwill. But Kant also says that our experience of life is a combination of the actual things in our experience and our ideas of those things. And so my experience of this pen, for example, has a lot to do with the pen itself, but it also has to do with my ideas of pens that have built up over my 31 years of experience in life. He says my experience of these things then is a combination of the things and my ideas. And so there's always some cause to doubt that I've fully grasped what exists outside of me. Others we looked at, Kierkegaard. Kierkegaard says that nothing is finally provable in an absolute sense, that we need to demonstrate simply that Christianity or any religious upbringing or any worldview is rational, not that it is provable beyond any reasonable doubt. So he says that's what a religious person should do, but that religious person should acknowledge that it's possible that he's wrong. The next was Heidegger. Heidegger says that kind of reiterates the same stuff, but he says, because it's difficult to know things, the things that society tells you you have to believe and you have to do might not be real. So if society tells you to do things that don't feel like they kind of jive with what you want to do, don't do them. That's his deal. Live authentically, he says. And Sartre and Derrida, the other two who I mentioned in there, kind of mention the same thing. Live authentically. They say the world is more complex than we could ever imagine. We are more complex than we could ever imagine. And then in complexity, there is beauty. So we should appreciate that rather than trying to squash it. But along with that comes the idea that we can never really fully know if what we've chosen to do with our lives was the right thing. We got to make the choice, do it authentically, as we said, and run with it, live out of it. But realize that other people can authentically live differently from us. And it is in that authenticity, that authentic exchange, where all of us bring all of our questions forward, and all of us bring all of our ideas and worldviews and assumptions and things to bear on whatever we're studying, in this case, the Bible, that we're really going to tap into the beauty of the truth. There is a truth that's really hard to get to, but by engaging and really having everybody in the class kind of bring their all and bring their full self and bring all their questions and all of their interests and all of that other stuff to the table, that we can get a sense of what the biblical worldview really is all about, and thus also get a sense of what it means for us to buy into it. Now, real quick, if you are curious, here are the notes we took. They kind of are just a summary of what I was just saying. So I'm going to go ahead and hit play on these. That didn't work. 1 second. There, now it did. Authenticity is vital. Okay. Our interaction with the world around us is always mediated by a worldview. It is not possible to just encounter the world. We always bring our assumptions to it. We always bring assumptions that can't be proven true to it. And we can either consciously choose those assumptions and build our worldview on them through a life of careful reflection and thought, and in religious worlds we say prayer, of course, or we can have it chosen for us. But one way or another, we're going to have a worldview. So an intellectual, a mature intellectual, does not find his dignity in knowing everything, does not find his dignity in being certain about things, but rather about living out a worldview that he has chosen while still acknowledging that he could be wrong. We have to be keenly aware of who we are and what we bring to the table. We need to authentically share who we are and what we bring to the table in order that we can understand that which we are not. In other words, we can never approach an understanding of that which exists outside of us, including the Bible, or really any literature or history or any kind of human experience, without acknowledging that we bring a filter, we bring a lens to the experience, and that it could be wrong. Okay? And once we acknowledge that we could be wrong, we get to do this. We get to hold the Bible up to scrutiny. We get to hold Christianity up to scrutiny, Judaism up to scrutiny, and decide whether or not we buy them. And that choice is made freely. And once we make that choice freely, as adults, we can really be full-blown religious people or full-blown not religious people. And so, my takeaway from the whole thing is that I want you to make sure that throughout this year in this class, you bring your authentic self to the table, so that we can ask all the questions we have, so that we can try to answer all the questions we have, so that we can express all of the doubts and fears and hopes and dreams and stuff that we might have for what we're going to be studying. I know this was a longer video than the amount of time that you missed, but hopefully it helped. If not, be sure to send me some questions. And even if it did, be sure to send me some questions. It's been good working with you guys so far, and I look forward to continuing to do so. Peace.